talk about it. Have you read it yet? You haven't read it.
No.
Okay, here we go. Hey, everybody, we're back. Chip and Griff. This is the Chip and Griff show. He's Griff, in case you weren't sure. I'm Chip, and this is another show, and we're glad to have one. Heading into the Florida game, we got us a top 10 matchup, man.
Yeah.
Preseason, when you and I are hanging out at SEC Media Days in Atlanta, I don't think we saw this as a top 10 matchup. I think we thought one team would be in the top 10, but not those Florida Gators. What do you think about Dan Mullen's team, what he's been able to do with this squad in pretty short order?
Yeah, pretty impressive. Chip, just looking at the numbers, +9 turnover margin. That's taking care. Well, for them, it's really not taking care of the football. It's 18 turnovers forced. That's how Florida's done it. They've got a pretty active defense. They got some playmakers. They got a championship caliber defense. Now, there's questions about their offense, but this defense is no joke. I mean, and you can bet that Kirby and Jim Chaney are going to be very conscientious of taking care of the football down there in Jacksonville. Big game environment. Crazy things can happen in this world's largest cocktail party. Momentum, I think, will be big. But to your point, here are the Gators, ranked number 9. I don't think anybody saw them making a top 10 run. And with the loss to Kentucky, they've won 5 games since they lost to Kentucky, 5 straight. So some momentum for Florida coming into this matchup.
I got to say, this is neither here nor there, but, man, I was glad to see that streak with Kentucky get over, especially after last year when I thought, Kentucky, for all practical purposes, should have ended the streak
last year. How many years was it? Was it 31?
37, I think. I think they would have been going for 38 in a row or something like that. And so Kentucky is still another situation for Georgia to contend with. But the Eastern Division implications in this game, it really – do you feel like this is an Eastern Division elimination game? I know mathematically there'll still be ways for both teams to get to Atlanta, but, for all practical purposes, 9-7, Georgia's suffered its road loss already. The winner of this game is who we'll see in Atlanta?
Yeah, I think so. And this is what's great about college football, and everybody talks about expanding the playoffs. I said, hey, man, every weekend's a playoff in college football. That's the beauty of it, and I like that. I'm a big believer that the conference champion should be the only one that goes to the playoff. I don't like the way that Alabama backed into the playoffs last year any more than I like the way Ohio State backed in the year before. I think if you play in a 14-member conference, then you need to be the best team in your conference. As it was, Georgia had to play an extra game than Alabama. Alabama didn't have to play that championship game, and as it turned out, Alabama hadn't beaten a top 15 ranked team all year and was able to make the playoff. And against Ohio State, which had a worse loss, but had 3 wins against top 15 teams, including their conference championship. So I know that argument's over and behind us, but you're asking me about the elimination game, and this is where I would point out to fans that college football every Saturday matters, and certainly that will be the case in Jacksonville, Chip.
I'll tell you one thing. He has been consistent about this. Mike was beating that drum about Alabama not deserving to be in there back when he was covering Tennessee for SEC Country, and he's carried it on in here, drives the Bama fans crazy. But I tend to agree with you. I like that. I don't know why I guess there's reasons why the College Football Playoff Committee has not adopted that as a criteria, but I think it's easy enough to do, and that's what they do in the NFL and everywhere else. You got to win your league, to get into the big dance, and I agree with that 100%. Of course, this is an interactive forum. We're not ignoring you. Your comments are coming in here loud and clear. We'll get around to them. I can't remember who said it a while ago. We might as well cut to the chase, but somebody a while ago says Justin Fields comes in after a sluggish offensive start and leads Georgia to victory. So let's just not fool around and go on with the Justin Fields and Jake Fromm quarterback equation. Do you think this is actually so? You and I both. We know we're going to see Justin Fields in a game. That's been made clear. He's going to come in a game. Do you think what we experienced in Baton Rouge at LSU is a reason that we would see Justin Fields more in this game? Or do you think that we will see Justin Fields more going forward? I guess the opposite of that, could we see him less? Could Georgia stick with Jake Fromm throughout in a game? Because this is, as you brought out, This is a salty defense with Todd Grantham that absolutely gets after the quarterback. That's central to their defensive strategy, getting after the quarterback. Do you throw a young freshman in there because of that, or do you not put him in there because of that? It's a good question, right?
Well, I mean, I sound like Kirby Smart here, but it just depends. I mean, it's fluid. I mean,
Yeah.
if George is up by 3 touchdowns, do you throw a freshman in there? And if you're down by 2 scores, do you throw a freshman in there that's only thrown 1 pass on the road? I mean, the things that Jake Fromm can do with your offense is, now if nobody's blocking and if receivers are running the wrong routes and dropping passes, it doesn't matter who's playing quarterback, Chip.
Yeah.
But the fact of the matter is that Jake Fromm is very experienced and 18-3 as a starter and has proven himself in difficult situations. And I think Justin Fields is kind of a last resort as far as turning the whole offense over to him. Do I think we'll see him in spells and in periods? Absolutely, we've seen that all year. But the thing I would remind people is that Jim Chaney and Kirby Smart are watching practice every day.
That's what
Sitting
we
in
don't
the,
get to
they're
see.
sitting
Yeah.
in the film room with these guys, and they have a pretty good idea who can do what.
They have a whole set of data that we're not privy to see.
That's kind of what it's like. It's like if you're flying in the airplane and oh my God, there's turbulence. Hey, tell that pilot to go up to 45,000 feet.
Yeah.
Why? Well, because I'm uncomfortable right now.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
the air's got to be better up there.
That's right. That's right.
And I get the frustration. Well, but we know Justin Fields is. We know what? We know he was a great high school quarterback. That's what we know.
Yeah.
We know that Georgia has protected him and not put him in bad situations because they don't want to ruin the kid and they don't want to get him hurt. We know that early on he tucked the ball too soon on a couple of occasions and didn't slide and didn't protect himself. And there were a couple of hits, Chip, I wondered if he'd get up from.
Yeah.
He's a pretty tough guy. But what if you ran the kid now and he gets his block knocked off against Florida and he's out for the season? Then where are all the experts at?
Chaney mentioned that early in the year. He says, we're not just going to start running this guy,
so, I mean, my
point
point is, and ultimately, Chip, he may be the answer. I don't know. Yeah. But my point is, nobody's thinking about that. Everybody's just assuming that, what's behind curtain number one is better than what we're seeing. There's just that assumption. And
let's get to a couple of comments real quick. David West says, if Franks beats us, we are in big, big trouble. Go Dogs. The funny thing about that, I was talking to Pat Dooley earlier, and I can't remember, was it Treon Harris has beaten Georgia twice, I think. Wasn't that the quarterback that they had?
Yeah.
Yeah, and so, and don't go to sleep on Felipe Franks.
He beat LSU, didn't he?
He beat LSU, and he's shown great improvement under Dan Mullen. Dan Mullen is a good quarterback coach. Now, the flip side of that, Kirby Smart has a nothing but success against Dan Mullen over the years. And here's another interesting thing. You're talking about the Justin Fields. I do think one of the reasons we only saw Justin Fields in for 5 plays against LSU was the venue. As you know, the Tiger Stadium is one of the most loud and effective home fields there is anywhere. And I definitely think Kirby Smart's a traditionalist at the end of the day when it comes to quarterback, and he wouldn't want to throw his young guy out there and get his confidence wrecked. But the flip side of that is one of the cool things about the Georgia-Florida game. And y'all tell Mike over here some of the things you like about Georgia-Florida, the world's largest outdoor cocktail party, because he's never had the opportunity to do this. So this will be his first one. So I'm looking forward to him checking out the whole scene in Jacksonville and seeing what's different about it. He's only been able to follow it from afar over the years. But one of the cool things about it is you got a 50-50 crowd. So
well, wait a minute. I saw that last week at Alabama, Tennessee.
Well,
it was a 50-50. Well, it was
Alabama.
They weren't separated, but it was about 50-50 in Neyland State. I said my joke was, gosh, I can't believe Alabama failed to sell this game out in Knoxville. go ahead.
But you'll enjoy this. So years ago in the Georgia-Florida game, they used to split it up in kind of quadrants, or I think it was technically eighths. Mm-hmm. So you had Georgia fans, Florida fans, all the way around the stadium. But they had to eliminate that because there were too many border skirmishes, too many fights. So now it's truly half and half. So Florida one side of the field, their half. Georgia their side of the field, their half. So now you only have 2 borders to defend because they really do. These 2 fan bases really get after it. But my point on all that is it's never too loud. In other words, it's never too loud. The defense doesn't have an advantage against the offense like you would at LSU or Tiger Stadium or Alabama and Bryant Denny from the crowd yelling while you're on offense, because there's always, you got half one team and half the other. That could be more conducive to Justin Fields. It's kind of a fun environment, and in some ways less intense, even though it's more intense in a lot of other ways. So that might be a reason. But what about strategically? Do you think that he just absolutely can bring something to the table against the pass rush that maybe Jake Fromm
Maybe, one thing that happened against Tennessee when Tennessee brought pressure and Georgia brought Justin Fields in, I thought Tennessee had to back off of their pressure because of Justin's mobility. And, you gamble and blitz from the wrong area, and he's a guy that can hurt you. But, I guess my question would be is how long does that work? I mean, to me, it's a series here or there. I don't know how much Justin has progressed as a passer. I know Kirby said that, they don't want him to just be a package guy. They want him to be a quarterback, and they're trying to develop this guy. That's part of the reason he came to Georgia. He didn't want to be just a trick quarterback, essentially just comes in and runs the football. So I think it'll be a situation where, Kirby and Jim Chaney will go in with a plan, and then depending on how the game goes and what's effective or what's not effective, they'll make decisions what they think is best to win. I mean, I'd say, those two minds right there, if I were a Georgia fan, I'd feel pretty good with those guys making the decision.
I tell you what I think is really important to Georgia in this game in particular, and we will concentrate solely on taking some of your questions here in a minute, is that they don't get out of character. I thought that was the biggest thing in the LSU game. You and I talked about this and wrote about it to some degree after the LSU game. It's important that we get past that, but I thought that was a big contributor to Georgia losing at LSU was they kind of got out of character, starting with the ill-fated fake field goal. But that wasn't all of it. It was just what they were calling on offense, what they were doing on offense. It was clear to me that Jim Chaney and James Coley went in there with some kind of idea that going fast and spreading the ball around was going to be the route to beating LSU when they ran those 9 plays in a row before the field goal. They never got back to running that way. Now, you pointed out correctly that LSU adjusted, and there's no question that they did, but, it's not static. I mean, Georgia had to adjust as well. And if they went from 3-man front to a 4-man front or whatever, you adjust too. I just didn't think Elijah Holyfield, namely, got the ball in his hands, and DeAndre Swift was running it pretty good with those plays, whether it be a lead, a zone read, whatever it was, those were the plays that work. And that guy right there, Elijah Holyfield, was hot, and he needed the ball more than 7 times. I think it's important that Georgia gets that element involved in this game.
Yeah, just a concept of going with the hot hand, and I know that's not what Georgia's done. They fancy themselves as 4 deep at running back and 10 deep at receiver, and gosh, Chip, when push comes to shove, I think you need to put your best guys out there, even if you hurt some people's feelings. But that's not how this program has been built. Kirby's done it with a committee approach to running back, a committee. I mean, what do they got? 19 receivers on the roster, for goodness sakes.
Yeah.
I mean, they could use about 4 of those scholarships on the defensive line.
That's a true number. I think it's 14 or 15 on scholarship, but they have several.
They need those numbers on the D line is where they need them. That's one area of recruiting that needs to be addressed for sure, because that's the biggest concern. Really, I mean, as much time as we're spending on offense, Chip, I think the real key to this game is how effective Georgia's front 7 is against the Florida run game, because I think everything trickles down from there. I mean, if you're shutting down Florida's offense, then you can afford to be patient on offense.
Yeah,
and play field position football, which we've seen Georgia do in a lot of the first half of these SEC contests, and that leads to turnovers. What was the last game? The first time that their first score wasn't a defensive or a fumble recovery for a touchdown.
Actually, good point. Yeah, did we point that out? I don't think we did. Yeah, first time he didn't have a fumble recovery touchdown as the first score. That's incredible. I've just moved this over here so Mike can see the comments as well. And Cherie Byra, we'll get around to predicting a score a little bit later in the broadcast. But I think Jonathan Crump makes a good point here, saying keep chopping wood, and that's what will win. And that's kind of what I'm talking about, is kind of staying in character throughout the game. I think that's definitely now, no doubt about it. Florida will be one of the best defenses that Georgia has seen, certainly of the ilk that you've seen in the last 2 games or 3 games against, because I thought I'm including Tennessee in there. I thought they were a pretty decent defense. The end result of the Alabama game aside, but certainly LSU, I think, and Florida very similar in the things that they're doing. And Todd Grantham very, very aggressive. So just like in the Mississippi State game, I guess it was last year when they came, Georgia on the first play of the game. I don't know if you saw it, runs a play action fake right down the, both the safeties come tearing up, and they right down the middle, touchdown on the first play of the game. You have to take advantage of Todd Grantham's aggression because he's going to be aggressive. That's what he does. And that's what Florida does.
Well, and that's why Kirby said so much of the focus last week was working on pass protection with the offensive line, because Georgia has been susceptible at tackle. I mean, Andrew Thomas got beat one-on-one. We've seen Jake Fromm. He got sacked 3 times against Tennessee. I think he was sacked 2 or 3 times against LSU. There were 4 turnovers. That offensive line, as celebrated as they are, they didn't look real good against LSU, Chip.
I don't know if this is the real Ray Goff. Is this year a failure if Georgia loses this game, loses this game, and thus doesn't win the SEC?
Failure is such a strong word. It would be a disappointment, I think.
Yeah, I think it would definitely be. I mean, I think anything short of Atlanta is a disappointment for this team. And look, that's what comes with expectations like they are. And I don't think they were unrealistic expectations from the beginning. Now, you and I both expressed reservations about a lot of things that was going on in Georgia. You touched on it right there, and I want to drill down on this for just a minute. The problems that Georgia is experiencing this season are directly related to the recruiting failures they've had the last 2 years. Georgia has gotten beat for some very exceptional defensive linemen, a lot of them right out of the state, who went to Alabama, who went to Michigan, who went to Florida State, went to Auburn. Those guys aren't on your roster right now, and I think that's where Georgia's failing is. You and I have talked every week about the nose guard play, which has not been up to snuff. But there was a bit of a regime change, it looked like last week. Jordan Davis getting a lot of snaps in there, ends up with 7 tackles. I actually will have to be on the lookout to see if that kid starts this week. I doubt if he will, because that's not how Kirby and them roll generally. But that's where Georgia is failing right now, right up the middle of the defense. And I think maybe not having a Roquan Smith there's part of that as well.
Yeah, Monty Rice has had that knee issue that's limited his snaps, and he's kind of one of their resident tough guys in there in the middle. And Natrez Patrick really hasn't had the kind of year that I think he needed to have, either for himself or for Georgia. Just not enough big plays at linebacker. An outside linebacker. I mean, DeAndre Walker has 4 sacks, but what is Walter Grant on the other side? I can't remember even hearing his name called. I mean, I know he's got tackles, but what plays have been made over there? I just don't see any plays being made over there. And, that's a problem when you're not making any plays. And Ledbetter had a pretty good performance against LSU, but really that was his first marquee performance of the year. And they need these guys. It comes down to players, Chip. They can X and O all they want, but, if these Georgia players don't rise up and start playing with some emotion, they're not going to beat Florida, because Florida comes in there with all the swag and all the emotion. And Georgia's going to have to match that. And I don't know that we've really seen that type of championship emotion out of Georgia truly since the South Carolina game.
This is where I think a loss to LSU might not have been the worst thing in the world for Georgia. I think that was a wake-up call. Let's face it, Georgia had not really been challenged in any game all year long. They hadn't faced any adversity. As soon as they did face some adversity, I felt like they really melted in Baton Rouge.
I think you used that in the headline.
I might have used melt in the headline.
I think you did.
And but that's really what I was thinking when I came out of it. And interestingly, right now, I posted to Dog Nation shortly before this podcast began. I called there's a man named Paul Schimpf, who's a sports performance expert on the Georgia campus. And I feel like if you and we're just sitting here at the bar and we're talking about Florida and Georgia and how they're coming in. Obviously, Florida, as you alluded to, has won 5 in a row in the conference and knocked off LSU, and then had a pretty decent win against Vanderbilt. Conversely, Georgia's coming off that loss to LSU. So I was thinking, well, if you're looking for the checks and balances in this thing, you would put a check in the column for Florida for confidence. So I called this guy because he's an expert on the subject, and to find out how much of a role does confidence play in sports performance. Thinking naturally, Michael Jordan's pretty confident,
sure.
But he actually said it's way overrated, and so he gave a bunch of examples as to why. And most of us could come to these same conclusions probably if we just thought about it. But He said if everything's going right all the time and you're winning, in other words, Georgia goes in there LSU and they just hammer them, and now you're going down to you're not fixing anything, you're not changing anything, you feel like everything's okay.
Yeah, there's no trigger for change. There's no catalyst for change.
He actually alluded to the whole thing with Florida, Vince Dooley is a guest lecturer for him every semester, and he had a conversation with Vince Dooley about Saban going to Tua in the middle of Georgia's championship game, and he said, how could he have the guts, to make that move? And Vince Dooley's answer to him was, well, because he lost to Auburn a couple of weeks before, and Jalen Hurts hadn't played well in what they were doing, and he made up his mind, if that happens again, I'm going to the other guy. I'm going to make that change up. Now, I don't know if that means that Georgia will see more from Justin Fields in this necessarily, but I do buy what Dr. Schimpf was saying in terms of sometimes you can have too much confidence. And so now he did not downplay the fact that you need confidence. You need to be confident in what what you do. You need to have a belief in what you do, but you also can't be overconfident. You've got to always be trying to think of ways to get better. And we hear that from Kirby every
Well, but
week.
that's the question, when talking with Kirby. I mean, Kirby makes it sound like it's going to be more of the same. I mean, he hasn't really tipped his hand and said much is going to change.
Yeah,
just need to execute. Just need to do it better. Now, I don't know
which I think is code for who's going to see some major changes.
Well, maybe. I mean, when push comes to shove, like you said, maybe he'll go to Fields a lot quicker. But another difference is, and I did a story on this last week, Tua was a lot further along in terms of experience when they made that move. Again, Justin Fields has only thrown one pass in a road environment.
How much had Tua played before that game? Like
they played the same amount of games, but Tua had thrown, I want to say he'd thrown 80 or 90 passes, and Fields has thrown 25. I don't have the stats in front of me.
He doesn't get a chance to throw live very much.
No, he doesn't. You know what? And I'll tell you what. I'll go back to the start of the year, and I think Georgia wasted a lot of opportunities in those early games. Against Middle Tennessee and Austin Peay and Kirby being Mr. Nice Guy and bringing the third string guy in there to hand off, when you could have had Justin Fields throwing the football. Now,
that's a very good point.
You might upset some people by scoring 70 points, but you wouldn't be sitting here right now with a green quarterback that you may need to come in and provide some relief pitching.
Yeah, that's a really, really good point right there, that maybe they should have thrown with him a little bit more. Zach Smith brings up a good point here, and this alludes to some things. I asked Kirby about this earlier this week, and he tried to downplay it, but you could tell there was a little bit of credence to it.
Oh yeah,
about
third and from.
Not just on third line, but just generally Georgia's O-line being beat up because you got Ben Cleveland out, you got Solomon Kinley playing with a gimpy
he offered up the Andrew Thomas injury without even being asked about
it. And Andrew Thomas playing with a gimpy leg, so he was kind of validating that maybe they're a little beat up. Cade May starting at that right guard instead of Ben Cleveland. But so what our friend here was saying, we need to put ourselves in situations where success is achievable. Third and long on every drive, won't hack it. And hey, that is a problem. Down and just now, the crazy thing is Jake Fromm was actually pretty good on third and long last year. He hadn't been good this year at all.
Well, when you got, Nick Chubb and Sony Michel and Javon Wims, that makes a big difference. And, even talking with Herb Street today, he said the same thing about the level of play in the backfield. And, Holyfield has been a pleasant surprise and leads the SEC in yards per carry. But, DeAndre Swift has had a disappointing year. He's not 100%.
Yeah.
And they really miss Swift being 100%. And let's face it, for whatever reason, Fromm hasn't been on the same page downfield with a lot of these receivers. I think the Terry Godwin injury was more costly than we even realized at the time.
100% on that.
They've had that big play, that 75-yarder to Terry, but what else do you think about? I guess Holloman caught a ball, and and the other thing, Jeff Dancer brought this up to me the other day. We were at the basketball game at UAB. I'm sure we'll get a lot of basketball questions on here.
Go ahead. We'll answer basketball questions here as well.
He said, you think about the stuff Kirby was dealing with early in the year, the youth. I mean, the guys dropping the football before the goal line.
Yeah.
That doesn't happen on championship teams.
No.
And he didn't say that. I'm saying that.
Yeah.
Can you imagine that happening in Alabama?
Yeah.
I can't. So there was some youth on this Georgia team that, some things that needed to be worked out, some growing pains. And, everybody kind of whistled by the graveyard because, well, Vanderbilt ran for 91 yards in the first half, but oh geez, they won. And yeah, Tennessee hit Jake Fromm 3 times and forced 2 fumbles, and the longest pass play was 23. But hey, it was 38-12, so everything's cool. And yeah, Missouri ran for 161 yards and 4 touchdowns on the ground, but hey, they won 43. Everybody's whistling by the graveyard saying, hey, we're winning. It's okay. We're winning. It's okay.
You were saying that, and Kirby was saying that.
And all those things came together at LSU.
Yeah.
It all culminated that day in Baton Rouge and ended up with one big fat loss. And so now Georgia's got to clean all that up and get back to being the team we saw in the third quarter at South Carolina.
Deborah Breedlove wants to know, will Ben Cleveland be available Saturday? He will not be. He is fully out, and that's kind of what we expected a while back. That broken fibula is not easy to come back from, period, especially if you're a 350-pound.
They were saying 4 weeks then, Chip. We both looked
I
think somebody actually reported that.
Not that we're doctor. There was some reports out there.
Be back in 4 weeks. 4 weeks would have been, let's see, that'd have been October 20th.
That would have been late. It would have been the LSU game. Yeah.
No, it didn't happen.
Yeah, and I hope Cade Mays is, and now Walter MacArthur says Cade Mays is playing good. Good is being the key here. He's not playing great. He's playing good. But I do believe there's no question there was a drop off, between him and Ben Cleveland. There's a reason Ben Cleveland. You got to think back to the Auburn game last year. Ben Cleveland comes in for Solomon Kinley, who was getting his head handed to him in the Auburn game, and then did not relinquish that spot for the rest of through the championship game, the championship run, and into this season. So he was playing there for a reason. I think Cade Mays has a terrific future, and look, as Mike was just alluding to, I agree with that 100%. This is a young football team, and that's where some of the expectations coming in the season might have been unrealistic. What was it? Kirby said it. SEC media days, pressure is a privilege, and all that kind of stuff. And Georgia's recruited.
Kirby knew
classes.
Though.
Yeah, 6'3".
There's a reason why Kirby did it. There's a reason why he tried the fake field goal at LSU. Because Chip,
he was not confident.
He was not confident in what they could do, and he felt like they needed early momentum.
Yeah,
I mean, you listen to Kirby, and I say all the clues are there. If you listen to what Kirby says from week to week, he tells you what's going on with his football team, and there's always a reason why coaches do and say things. And Kirby again trying to make his young players feel comfortable with the pressure that was going to be on them.
Yeah.
So hence, pressure is a privilege. Now I saw the slogan was back up again this week. Make the main thing keep the main thing the main thing. So,
there's a little Butch Jones in Kirby Smart. And he was out there with the microphone these past couple of weeks. Remember how Butch used to do that? Yeah. Didn't he do that at practice all that? He always had a microphone in practice.
Well, there's a little,
I'm kidding everybody. Don't go nuts, buddy. Chip Towers is comparing.
No, I mean, the fact of the matter is all these coaches do it. It's just Butch was a lot more public with what he shared with people.
Yeah.
And when you're winning, all these slogans make you sound like a genius. If you're losing, like for example,
they make you sound silly.
Well, look at how many Georgia fans turned on Kirby Smart and said the plan is there is no plan.
Yeah.
Well, they better get a plan soon.
Yeah.
Everybody went ballistic at the start of the year. You went, oh yeah, that's genius. There is no plan, Chip. They're just going to do what works. It doesn't. By the 8th week, they say, well, they better have a plan. Come on. Kirby knows what he's doing. He spent the entire offseason scheming. There's a reason why he has these catchphrases. There's a reason why he creates this team mentality. And it's to prepare a very young team for games like we're going to see on Saturday, Chip.
I'm getting some of your questions. Michael Morrow, any chance we see Quay Walker on the field this season? We've seen him on the field this season.
I don't know how much you want to see him.
He's a true freshman. They haven't shelved him, have they? After the
No, but it's not like, again, people keep reaching for what's behind door number one. You got to hope those guys with the experience that have been in the battles are going to apply their knowledge and their experience to these games. Quay Walker hadn't even been through a full off-season of conditioning, has he?
No.
He wasn't an early enrollee, I don't think.
No, he was not. No, I remember visiting with him. Rhett Walker says we're really missing Zamir White this year.
I don't know. Are you? I don't.
Yeah, we have no way of knowing.
He didn't look great in the open practice.
No, not in the open practice, but there were a lot of people telling us that saw him over the summer and going back last spring that he was going to end up being the guy. Just no way of knowing.
I don't see
a moot point at this point.
Kid with a knee brace on. Just seeing him physically, it's not like he's just some hulking figure. It's not like you look at him and go, "Oh wow, that's Zamir White." You look at him and go, "Hey, that's a football player. Who is it?"
Right? Yeah. Zach Smith says, I like the fake call, to be honest. Rod should have a pass option that was 4th and 9. You know, it's interesting. We were laughing about it. See, the thing is, you're asking a lot of a kicker there. I would have liked to call a lot better on 4th and 1 or 2 than I did on 4th and 9. But the fact of the matter is, on that side of the field, you had Grant Delpit and Greedy Williams. I mean, a couple of all conference caliber defensive backs who, you know, you did have them fooled for about a second, and then they just ran it back down. And you know, as far as Rodrigo, that situation, he is a cool, calm athlete when it comes to kicking the football. But it's hard to be cool and calm when you're out there in wide open spaces and
need 9 yards.
A pass option. I'm not sure whether he could have. Never seen his. I have seen him throw out there with the other kickers, so I'm sure it's, you know, better than the average Joe. But I don't know if that would have worked or not. I didn't like the call at all, and you know, not to go back on that too much because we talked about it some last week, but I understand that you see things on film. That's what special teams coaches and all those support personnel. I would think every week you're going to see some things on film, but it's up to the head coach to recognize the moment. Everybody has headphones on, and you know it would have taken 1 second for Kirby to say, "Never mind." You know, take the call off. I want the points here, you know. And I thought that's what Georgia should have done.
This is the stuff that drives me nuts here.
Yeah.
Should Kirby Smart go after Dan Enos? Let me make something clear here. It doesn't matter who the coordinator is. Kirby Smart's in charge of the offense.
That's right.
I mean, don't think that Jim Chaney's doing things and Kirby goes, "Hey, Jim, what'd you do? I didn't know what was coming."
Yeah.
They sit at the table every week, and Kirby Smart dictates. You know, no, I think we need to run it this much more. They have a package every week that Kirby Smart is very well aware of. It's not like Kirby doesn't have any say. When people talk about changing coordinators, it drives me batty because Jim Chaney is 3 years into this relationship with Kirby Smart.
Yeah.
Think about that. And now you want to bring somebody fresh in.
Yeah.
And think of how long it takes to get that relationship. I mean, one person brought up is maybe the problem's not that Jim's calling plays. Maybe the problem's that Jim's not coaching quarterbacks anymore.
Well, that's what I was about to say. I mean, I probably haven't weighed in there on enough. Maybe I'll weigh in there on this week. But I said in the preseason when we did that countdown of the most important thing, you know, it's like, you know, it's not an automatic that Georgia's making. I get why Kirby did this. I mean, Kirby is all about keeping his staff together for recruiting reasons. And that was necessary to keep James Coley on, to make him co-offensive coordinator and give him quarterbacks again. There was no guarantee, you know, that if it wasn't broke, don't fix it. Now you're making a change at the key position, and you know, now Jake Fromm is in the room when they're in the position meetings with James Coley. Now they get together as an offense, but he's got a separate room with the tight ends. And who knows how that might have.
Here's a good question from B.J. Davis, why Jake's holding the ball so long. Well, Kirby says his receivers have been running the wrong routes.
Yeah.
And that's
they
a problem.
They haven't been able to get on the same page.
Yeah, I mean, if the receiver's running the wrong route.
Even him and Goblin have had a tough. And I think that's, again, you talk about, you know, Goblin was that guy last
New receivers
year.
coach.
Yeah, new receivers coach too, and Cortez Hankton. Yeah, so it's no guarantee, you know. I mean, whenever there's changes. But the bottom line is this is a young team. And look, no matter what happens, we've only got 1 minute here, so we need to be wrapping up. I'm excited about the Georgia-Florida game. I think it's great that it's a top 10 matchup. This is the way it should be. It's only the 6th time, and I forget what the stat was and how many years.
Played since 1933. Right?
But no, I don't think it's 6 times since 33. I don't think it's going on. Is it going on? Way
That's
back?
when the series. I think.
Yeah, but that both teams are ranked in the top 10. You know, usually one team's up, the other one's down is kind of been the tendency in this series. But this is what the Georgia-Florida game was designed to be. This is why it's a traditional rivalry. It's always at the end of October.
What do we got? Hire good coaches like Saban. Do you not realize Mel Tucker and Jim Chaney are two of the premier coordinators in the nation? I mean, just again, people just assume just these grab bag questions and notions. It just, to me, Chip, coming from the outside, you know, just walking into this Georgia program, let me tell you, this place is quality. This is a championship staff. And, you know, I think some of these Georgia fans are just absolutely crazy not to appreciate and respect the coaches that they have on staff. And the second guessing I've seen for Kirby Smart is unbelievable. And for Mel Tucker and Jim Chaney too. Mel Tucker was one of 3 finalists for the Tennessee head coaching job.
Yeah.
And Jim Chaney is regarded as one of the best offensive minds in college football. That's not the problem. The problem is 68% of your roster is freshmen and sophomores. It's one of the youngest teams. I think it is the youngest group in the SEC. And there's other guys on the other side of the ball getting paid to play well too and make good coaching calls like LSU and Dave Aranda and his $2.5 million. So I think you just got to be realistic about it and understand there's other good coaches, other good players. Georgia's a young football team, Chip.
But here's my daughter. How creepy will it sound to people if I say I'm outside where you are right now and I got to give you these documents? Not creepy at all. Troy Sadowski, we are going to wrap it up here. Troy Sadowski, the former Bulldog, says, Dogs bounce back with a great game. People are wanting us to give a score prediction, so we'll do it real quick. Troy Sadowski, if I'm not mistaken, I don't think you ever lost to Florida. He was there in the 80s when Georgia would win regardless of what the situation was every year. And then it was 1990, 91 when Spurrier got there that the series seemed to flip the other way. So I don't know if you got a score prediction just yet. I don't know if I want to give one with a asterisk next to it because I'll give a more firm one later. What do you see happening in this game?
I think Georgia will win by double digits. I'm not ready to give a score yet, but I think they'll win by double digits.
Are they still favored by 7? Is that
7?
Yeah, Saber. I tend to agree with that. The thing everybody's forgotten is from a personnel standpoint, Florida shouldn't be touching Georgia. It doesn't always lost one, Troy says. Thanks. Probably 86, I imagine, if I had to guess. Bet you won 85, 87, 88. But I tend to agree. We'll come up. We'll give you a firm score. Thursday will be Towers Take, brought to you by Marco's Pizza on here. I'll give you a firm score prediction then. Jeff Land says 43-14. Jim Hill Jr. says 44-19 Georgia. It's always amazing. Everybody predicts a blowout every week when you're a fan. 35-17 Dogs, says Kenneth Wiggins II. 41-20. Let's go Dogs. Beat Gator, says Rebecca Hughes. Peace. Cherie Byra says 24-14 Georgia. Georgia's coming with a vision.
Got Philip Wells, 41-20.
41-20. So we're going to wrap it up with that. Thank y'all for hanging out. He's Griff. I'm Chip. The Chip and Griff Show comes on every Tuesday, sometime around lunchtime. This one's a little less well slotted as some of the other shows that you see on here in these podcasts. But we thank you for hanging out with us, and we thank you for clicking on Dog Nation and uploading the Dog Nation app because that's where you get notifications of all our stories as soon as they go up. He's got stuff up there, and I got stuff up there right now. Y'all go read it. See you.